Almost a year and 2.5 million views later, and here we are. If I haven't made it clear in the past, I can't thank everyone out there enough for giving my content a chance based on the Dark Souls 3 boss ranking video. It allowed my channel to grow into what it has today, and I'm forever grateful. But with those 2 DLCs in the book, I think it's finally time to give the difficulty of the DS3 bosses a re-rank. However, this time around I'll be the one ranking the bosses, at least I'll be the first of us. I think my favorite part of this channel is the ability to genuinely get you all involved in videos. So for the future, I plan to offer my own opinion on rankings first, and then give you all the opportunity to vote on any rankings or lists that I make, and comment on my video with your thoughts on the given topic. I'll use those comments in a community video like I've done here and there in the past, and it'll open a real discussion between our community, and most importantly give you all a platform to speak your thoughts in a video. So let's start today with my view on the difficulty of the DS3 bosses. As a fun twist, since I have so much experience with this game above all the others, I'll give my favorite tips here and there as sort of a guide. Once the video concludes, don't forget to check out the survey in the description and comment below with your thoughts on the difficulty of the varying bosses of DS3. With all that said, let's jump in with number 25. Coming in at the bottom of my list is the almighty Vape Lord. Oh, how times have changed, you son of a bitch. You know, it's wild to think the original DS3 boss ranking was made off of a week's worth of opinions on the game from all of us. That means my commentary was solely based around a single playthrough. And I remember bitching and moaning, "Wah, the poison, it's so easy to die." Well, it still is if you fall victim to it, but it's 100% your fault if you do. After fighting the King of Clouds a bajillion times, now I've got this fight broken down to a science. Fun fact, did you know if you approach his left hand before the fight even starts, you can get free hits in? That's right, if you've got a strong enough weapon, you can break the first bracelet before the fight has even really begun. Then follow up on the second left-hand bracelet while he's smacking with his other hand, and finally beat the last bracelet as he staggers. It only takes a few hits, and as long as you keep your greed in check, it's a cakewalk. Now, something I should mention for those that don't know is I've speedrun this game on and off for a few months, so my perspective on some bosses has changed quite a bit as a result. I've done plenty of standard playthroughs, soul level 1 runs, and speedruns. So as I go through each boss, I'll give the best strategies that I know of for each. But for Puff Puff the Magic Skeleton, it's really not something that requires any effort. I did a viewer speedrun a few weeks ago, and for many of us, it was the first time we realized he could even summon skeletons and a sword. I don't want to delve too much into quality here because that's not the point of this video, but it's gonna be hard since some of my opinions have also changed on that over time. As a quick segue on gimmick or puzzle bosses in Soulsborne as a whole, I think FromSoft often misses the point on these type of fights. After playing a lot of Zelda, a series that has bosses that center almost entirely around figuring out mechanics rather than overcoming difficulty, it became abundantly clear what these bosses in Souls lack. In those games, the bosses are a spectacle. They're entertaining, thrilling, and damn fun on the whole to overcome even though there's minimal threat of death. That's because there's different forms of entertainment. Sometimes we get it from a wild challenge, other times we just want a blockbuster battle even if it's easy. I think fights like Yorm do this the best as FromSoft's ever come, but they still lack a bit of oomph. And when it comes to shit gimmick bosses, Volnir lands right at the top of the heap, both as a crap boss and a painfully easy one. So, you know how I mentioned speedrunning? Well, no matter how many times you reset, you know who you gotta fight before the clock even hits a minute every damn time? Gundyr! Man, I still love this boss, but holy shit have I seen enough of this face. Truth be told, I honestly think I could do this fight blindfolded at this point. You get a bunch of hits in when he gets up, stay close, and strafe most attacks or parry if you're feeling a little saucy. Eventually he goes phase 2, but by that time he should be abusing that booty like I've always told you to, and his health should be paltry by the time the change is complete. And honestly, even this phase is ridiculously easy to handle if you just stay in close and strafe. So Gundyr, while I love you as a boss, you're nothing more than a worn down speed bump on the way to Firelink. A lot of you are probably surprised to see the Deacons come in as the 3rd easiest. Let's keep things in perspective. This is like comparing fighting a toddler to fighting a 2-year-old. This fight really only has 2 things that are bothersome to me. Fucking fatties. These guys are such a nuisance. Not only are they tankier than their skinny comrades, but they have absurd pursuit and a force spell. That and they always get in the damn way when I'm trying to abuse the spawn of the boss Deacon. No, I don't want to backstab you, no! Number 2, there's pretty much only 2 ways to die in this fight. Greed through excessive abuse trying to end your suffering, or get the magical unicorn one-shot. Once in a blue moon, the enemies will decide to get smart and attack you all at once, and they decimate your health bar. So sure, I'll give them that, but like I said, it's a rarity. If you really want to make this fight go from a joke to an outright cakewalk, do this. Count your deacons. 1 deacon, 2 deacons, 3 deacons, 4 deacons, 5 deacons. Sorry, I was trying to make that exciting for you. Once 5 are down, go get Big Buster Brown. Smack him a little bit and don't backstab a fatty. Your stamina bar is gone, move away and throw an alluring skull and watch as all the peasants wander off in pursuit while the boss stands there like, oh shit. I don't know why I'm giving you advice. I know you don't need it, but in any case, you're welcome for giving you a roadmap to making an easy fight easier. ol' Yormi. The spectacle of the whole thing still gets me every time. Toe-to-toe with a giant using the Ruler of Storms to smack him down. You know, I used to actually have a lot of trouble with this fight. I didn't really die too much, but it took me forever to kill him because I could never find the time to charge the Storm Ruler. Well, like most bosses, you can find creative ways to explode his AI. Here's the plan. Run in between his legs and grab the Storm Ruler. Run back between them again and equip it. If you can't, that's cool, just be ready to dodge his first attack because you won't have time to charge it. After dodging backwards, charge it up and let her rip. Once he buffs, you get a free charge and hit. Now here's where you really take this fight. Trust Dadmod here, stand your ground a few meters in front of his crotch. That's right, disrespect this man. Be all, I see you lying on the ground, I don't give a flying fuck. I'm charging the Blade of Doom in your face. And he'll y'all,
not in my house.
And when he gets up, he'll try to smack you down, but the crotchety giant is too slow and you can simply get back up and unleash your fury in his face. Strategy aside, this boss is mostly a cat and mouse game. It's how long are you gonna make me dodge your paltry attacks until you're dead. No matter how you handle it, his attacks are so slow that even if you do get hit, you have plenty of time for healing. So while I do love this fight for its grandeur, it sure is child's play in terms of challenge. I don't care if I've got a reliable strategy for you, I still hate your pus-filled guts, Skankwood! This fight is less about the boss being difficult and more so about the waiting game. If you don't have a solid plan to bust its balls, then you're gonna be subjected to hollows and acid diarrhea. Even so, it's not like any of it's difficult, it's just a nuisance that elongates a remarkably boring and simple fight. So if you want to end this nightmare as quickly as possible, run up to his right side and trigger the fight, throwing an alluring skull as you do. There are charcoal pine bundles in 2 spots right in the beginning of the settlement, so let's make some use of them. Pop it as he moves into you and bam! One hit. Turn around and immediately focus the main ball sack. I used an unupgraded Astora straight sword and it easily breaks in 5 hits. Your bundle should still be active at this point, so proceed to your right and smack the hand and boom! 3 sacks down, and that's all 3 you can hit before you even had time to think about shitting the bed, you stupid. Okay, I'm getting carried away. This all depends on your weapon, but two-handing with straight swords will help you as you fall because you can use your second bundle and easily get some quick whacks in. As the hand comes out, I go one-handed and beat it down with ease. Then you hit up under the butt cheek sack, and by that time, hit the hand for whatever's left. Taste my ass, bitch! Now, of course, sometimes things can go awry, but even without a plan, this boss is still more a practice in tedium than actual difficulty. Let's be clear, Vort lands here by default, not because he's actually hard at all. There's only one possible way for this fight to be difficult at all, and that's if you don't kill him quickly enough in phase 2. And the only reason phase 2 is any sort of bother is because this big bootied hoe has his whole body become a hitbox. Still, even then, it's not all that difficult to dodge in this phase, but forget about all that. First of all, lightning resin makes your damage in this fight stupid high, so take advantage of the 2 you can easily find in the beginning of Highwall. Once you're buffed, go in and laugh at the fact he only has 1 move you have to dodge, the backhand attack. This allows you to stay under him and punish. Don't forget to punish even further when he starts buffing. If you're as aggressive as I am, he'll be close to dead by the time he's running around like a rabid dog. Once he's done throwing his tantrum, simply dodge under the 3rd dash and
finish him.
Of course, being such an early boss in the game, he shouldn't be overly difficult, but on subsequent playthroughs of the game, it becomes far too clear how simple this fight really is. Now, you might be having a laugh at this insta-kill boss coming outside the top 5 easiest DS3 bosses, but hey, I've got my reasons. They may be embarrassing, but don't look a man in the video while he's pouring out his soul shame, okay? I'll be honest, I'm awful at fighting the mini dragon guys. They're spammy and they kick my ass, so yeah, I do the speedrun strat of running past them all. Except for one thing, the true boss, the Axe and Chain God, is waiting to ruin your day. Seriously, remember the
kunai with chain
from Neo? Well, he's got it, and you are 100% praying to RNGesus when you climb the ladder without respecting him. Of course, most of the time it works running past it all and one-shotting the Wyvern, but it's still risky enough and I still suck hard enough at fighting the enemies, so just be a god and skip all that nonsense and give him the taste of your rod in his mouth. So I guess I've got to confess a change in opinion here. The Crystal Sage all that time ago came in on my top 10 easiest bosses list, and while I don't think it's that hard of a fight still, I do have more respect for the low HP struggle. If you can't effectively locate and dominate, then you are going to get spammed with all sorts of magic in phase 2, and you're going to be dead at light speed. Still, I don't find locating it that hard, and dodging the spells or using cover to block them while you're knocking down the clowns is fairly straightforward. Now, I wish I could say the speedrun strat for the Sage is simple considering the ease of the boss, but it's arguably one of the hardest to pull off in the entire game. Here's the trick. Whenever the the Sage casts his Soul Mass, he can't leave the arena as long as one Soul Mass is over his head. So what you do is wait for the attack and then hug his right hip, rotating him while you hit on and off while your stamina regens. This will keep the 2 Soul Masses on the left side of his head active long enough for you to get the 1 cycle kill. In a speedrun, you do this part with just barely enough damage to pull it off, but if you have a higher damage weapon, you could make this a piece of cake on a standard run. So I hope any of you that struggle will find this Soul Mass trick useful. Also, I literally just learned a week ago that the Sage could be parried. What the fuck? Easy boss gets easier, I guess. The fact is that as much as I love the Abyss Watchers, their challenge hasn't aged well as I've continued to play the game. The difficulty of the first phase largely depends on RNG as to whether the second or third Watchers spawn at the same time. If they do, they'll go fight each other, which makes your job of killing the boss Watcher a whole lot easier. In both phases, the key to this fight is spacing. It may seem super wise to use your dodges and staying close so you can get the punish, but there's actually a much simpler way that saves stamina. What you want to do is keep your distance far enough that he won't use any of his crazy pursuit attacks, but trick him into using easy to punish combos that you're out of reach of. As soon as they finish, you'll be at full stamina and can just walk forward and hit him into Stagger City. The second phase is largely the same. You can essentially punish the Watcher with spacing and backstabs here, as it'll bait an overhead slam that you can strafe around effortlessly. Factor in their small health pool and it only makes the fight all the easier, but they do at least come in close to the middle of the pack for their damage output and fire after effects that can cause you some trouble. Ugh, I didn't get to bemoan this fight enough in my Ashes of Ariandel review, so let me say right now that this fight is straight baloney, and not the good kind. Wait, is there a good kind? We're getting off topic. The fight is boring and it's stupid simple. Kill the wolves as they barely do anything to you. R1 spam this NPC like the casual that you are. Don't worry, he'll be dead by the time the wolf gets there, and then killing the wolf is a matter of waiting for it to sit freaking still. Make sure to take advantage of the fact that both the champion and wolf are weak to bleed. Also be sure to go ham during the second phase buff period for the wolf. If done right, you can kill it outright after the transformation because he always follows up with this ice breath attack. For that, you just stand next to his head and you're a-okay. I wish there was some magic mojo to make this fight even more quick, but really you're at the mercy of the Great Wolf to calm down and die. Doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because his well-telegraphed attacks aren't hard to dodge, but it sure is boring. I'm a bit mixed on the old Demon King. It's not really fair for me to judge him based on the challenge he offers in a speedrun because you always face him toward the end when your build is complete with a fully upgraded weapon and damage stat. If you face him in the middle of the game, he actually poses a much greater threat. I guess that's the thing with optional bosses like him though, you can choose to make it easier by going back when he's a cakewalk. You know, it begs a question, why didn't FromSoft scale the optional bosses? If you choose to go back later, why not give them additional HP and damage appropriate for your level? Well, maybe not damage for the old Demon King, that's actually what landed him this high. Even if you do go in late, his attacks still pack a mean punch and many aren't that easy to dodge. Even so, I can't think of the old Demon King as anything more than LOL really in my splits because of how much of a joke he can be in the late game. I could pretty much copy paste a lot of what I said about Champion's Gravetender and paste it here. I guess this fight is a bit more difficult with it being a true gang from the beginning, but it's really easy to separate them because Half-Life doesn't mind fighting from a distance while the Guardian stays on your ass like glue. Wiggity swooty coming for that booty. There's really no big strategy or mystery here. It's the same as Gravetender. Beat the man down and make him ever regret crossing you. The only reason I give him any additional credit is because at least this dude can parry. Now, I know this is traditionally an online fight, but that's kind of impossible to rank. I've been both the boss and the invaded, and it's a mix of player skill levels more than anything. Some players are pathetically easy to kill, others are PvP masters that are gonna beat you down. So I think the middle is a good spot. Not too hard of an NPC, but definitely not crazy easy either. And the player battles can be anything from crazy easy to insanely hard based on your own skill gap. With that middle tier boss out of the way, we're finally getting to the bosses that I consider to be truly challenging in some way. It's not a surprise that most of those remaining are either mid-game or end-game bosses because even if you do level and prepare well, they still pose a major threat. The first of these is the Dragon Slayer armor, or as I like to call him, the Turtle King. Why? This guy friggin' turtles behind that shield like crazy! Well, sometimes. It's really an RNG dependent fight. Sometimes he'll give you heavily punishable attacks like the AoE slam, and other times it's just turtle, turtle, turtle. His attacks do insane damage, but are telegraphed pretty well, so it's not bad. I'm still not a fan of the Londor gnats in the sky, but they aren't much of an issue in the grand scheme of things. You do at least get one guaranteed punish when he falls to the ground prior to the second phase. I don't know, it's kinda hard to rank the armor. If we're talking about the Turtle Troll, he'd probably get a higher nod, but overall this fight isn't that hard if he isn't too cruel to you. Sure to be a controversial rank, Pontiff Sullivan comes down this far on the list for a single reason: you can parry him. Yeah, parrying can trivialize this fight. Not only that, but you get a guaranteed parry chance to open the bout if you can execute. I'm just gonna let the speedrun kill play in the background because it really is insane how much this fight is pacified with this strategy. Now, I used to suck hard at parrying, but I've fought Pontiff plenty of times without it, including at Soul Level 1. That fight is a whole nother thing altogether and might even get my mark for the hardest fight in the main game. But in my own ranking, I can't ignore my ability to parry, so that's gonna land him here. Now, if you want a quick tip on how to become a parry king, here's what finally made me understand shield parrying. There's 3 pieces to the parry: the start, what I'll call the parry point, and then the recovery. So my original thinking was due to the smacking animation you get on a successful parry. I thought the point where the shield is swinging out was the parry point, but that's wrong. Everything clicked when I found out the start is pulling the shield over, the parry point is the moment where your shield is at its rightmost, the brief moment that it pauses. That's your window of opportunity. Then that smack back is just recovery time for the animation. So to become a parry king, you gotta time it so their weapon hits your shield when it's at its rightmost. Good luck, Ashen Ones. Coming in at the last spot out of the top 10 is Aldbich. Really what pushes him so high is the insane damage output in the second phase along with the terrifying arrow spam. I'm much more adept at dodging it these days, but it's still pretty difficult even when running in circles around the pillars to redirect them, all while trying to avoid his magic. The key with Aldrich is staying in close. Make sure you buff outside before going in. Once you do, rush to him as fast as possible. He'll either open with melee or arrows. If he opens with melee, beat that bitch. If he opens with arrows, hit once and then walk around until he fires and beat that bitch since those arrows don't track. Rarely he'll do a follow-up, but if he doesn't, make sure to get out of the way of his AoE slam to his backside and beat that bitch some more. Their trick to Aldrich's teleport is that he's gonna go the most opposite of your location. So if you stand in just the back half of the arena toward your right, he'll appear in the other half on the left. Use this to your advantage to always get in close. As long as you do this, he will not use his magic and he rarely uses arrows. But the reason Aldrich makes it this high on the list is because he can troll. Even with all that said, sometimes he YOLO teleports and buffs instantly, uses arrows and magic in your face because fuck you, and I find some of his attacks to be lanky and hard to read. Still, it's not too tough overall, just a bit of an annoyance if you get crappy attacks. When I made my original boss ranking, I legitimately only fought Osiris a single time, and I found that fight to be pretty easy. Well, that's kind of the nature of Osiris. Sometimes you'll get an easy fight, and other times it's gonna be like chasing around a crazed bat flying through your house. In the second phase, of course. The first phase is easy. Break that main rule of smacking that booty and instead hug that crotch pad. Eventually you'll go second phase and you can punish, and then you just gotta do your best to stick to that booty again. Back to the golden rule. Problem is he flies all over the place at will, or doesn't. It's random. His behavior is completely erratic, which makes it hard to be properly prepared. Instead, you gotta react on the fly, and that can be pretty challenging, especially when some attacks like the insta-charge have little to no tell and other attacks make his whole body a hitbox. So similar to the Dragon Slayer armor, this fight boils down to Osiris's mood. If he's feeling nice, he may not have a difficult time at all, but if he's being an asshat, put on your running shoes and prepare for the fight of your life. Champion Stundir finds himself in a similar place to Pontiff. I think both would be in contention for a top 5 spot if it wasn't for the ability to parry them. Though Gundyr differs a bit because though he opens the second phase with a guaranteed parryable attack, if you can't get the kill off it outright, then he may follow up with a number of insanely aggressive attacks that can't be parried. I still believe the hardest thing I may have done in this game to date is my Soul Level 1 fight with the champ with no parries. Any hit I took spelled certain death, so I had to transcend my inner dodge god, and I still can't believe I pulled it off. If you want to know a good strategy for a quick kill, you have to understand your own weapon. You want to damage him as he rises, parry, and damage him to the point where he is just barely off of transforming. You do this so when he rises you can get one more parry off and get loads of damage off before the transformation. Just be sure to get out with some stamina because his roar, so to speak, will stagger you. Then you parry that YOLO charge. God, that's satisfying after how rough that attack tracked me in my original playthrough. If done correctly, you should be able to beat him to death, or at least very close. Regardless, I'll never forget how tough this fight can be without parries, and even with them, one mistake can quickly cause this fight to go awry. Although I know many find the final boss of Dark Souls 3 to be lacking in challenge, he's a boss that's able to exploit one of my everlasting weaknesses in this game: overaggression, i.e. greed. The reason for this is he has many attacks that are identical, but sometimes they have follow-ups and sometimes they don't. So it becomes a trial and testing the waters of whether you can or can't attack, and that gets in my head a lot. And don't even get me started on the Pyro and Falchion version. That thing is a monster. What keeps him lower in the top 10 is the ability to stagger him in both phases and the ease of the second phase. Though I don't have any other tips for the first phase than be careful careful and use good judgment in taking attack windows, his second phase is a lot more scripted. For starters, rush in as soon as his buff animation is concluding. Depending on your weapon, you should have time to get 1 to 3 hits in before rolling out of the wombo combo. Just be aware if you don't time these dodges rhythmically with the swings, you'll be in for a world of hurt. Now, if you want to go full balls, you can actually iframe the AoE finisher at the cost of a bit of health for a larger punish. From here, it's just a matter of dodging his highly telegraphed swings, magic, and grabs. The health is a bit lower, so if you're able to execute the above tips, you should down phase 2 in no time. But though phase 2 is fairly simple, phase 1 gets Cinder the respect he deserves in my top 10. Now that we got the easy NPC DLC bosses out of the way, let's get to those that pose a major challenge. Of the 4 DLC bosses that I would consider to be a true test of your soul's mettle, I'm sure you're wondering why I put the princes at the bottom. Well, while they're certainly a challenging fight, I felt well prepared for this kind of thing. Their attacks remind me heavily of Lawrence in Bloodborne, and that fight is way tougher than this one. And I've been prepared throughout the entire series on how to handle a well-designed, speedy with slow gank boss, so despite the challenge it presents, I didn't find myself having too much trouble. With the DLC being so soon, I don't have any super concrete strategy as of yet, but I can offer some advice. First, kill the demon from below last. This gives you the easier of the 2 demon princes to deal with that heavily punishable beam attack. In the start of the fight, take note of the fact that every time the demon from below is not buffed and the demon in pain jumps straight for you. Take this time to beat down on the demon in pain a bit. That's essentially the fight, beat down on the one who's buffed while avoiding the other's poison. I didn't find it too hard, but do have some moss or a homeward bone handy in case you get the toxic. For the demon prince, it's really just a bigger demon, so it's not that bad. I think with time I may find this fight will get even easier, but to be honest, I would say the only bosses I seriously consider to be very difficult in this game are those that are in the top 5. And considering the bold claim I just made, I'm sure there's going to be some shock, awe, and even angry shouts at my placement of the Nameless King, especially considering I ranked him as my 2nd hardest boss in all of Souls in my top 10 hardest bosses video. The truth is, I bought into the hype at the time. Even on my first playthrough, I managed to beat the king on my 2nd try, that is, after dying to the King of Storms 3 times. And after playing more and more, it became clear how scripted this fight really is. Let's start off with the King of Storms. Run far forward in the area and buff as you like. You'll either get a lunge forward or tell that he's going to 180 on you by him stepping back a little bit. Either way, you're going to get a nice window to hit the head, which we'll want to do because with enough damage, you'll get a stagger. From here, just stay under the head and dodge the super telegraphed attacks and punish the beast. I seriously do not recommend locking on for this fight or staying far away. I know a lot of people have trouble with it, but it makes it a world easier if you can control the camera yourself. The only 3 attacks of concern are the lightning slam from the king, which can be hard to iframe, the downward fire breath, and the flying lightning throw from the king. Mostly the latter 2 are troll attacks that just waste your time and aren't hard to dodge, but do be prepared. Once you get to the 2nd phase, use your buff of choice. I recommend Darker Bleed and be ready to dodge that fast wind slam or iframe the slower moving wind wave. From here, it's a matter of dodging his incredibly well telegraphed attacks and get 1 or 2 hits safely. Don't be greedy. His attacks aren't hard to dodge as long as you know not to dodge when the tell comes but when the hit lands, which admittedly does take time to get good at, but that's true for the whole series, not just the king. Eventually he'll slam the ground with his spear, which is your cue to strafe behind him and beat the living hell out of him. You'll likely stagger him and then you can riposte and beat him some more on the rise. From here, it's more of the same. It really just is an endurance fight. It reminds me in a lot of ways of the Fume Knight. That's yet another boss that I hear so much about legendary difficulty, but he's much of the same. He's got high damage and HP, but all of his attacks are easy to dodge if you pay attention to the tells. I think that what makes these fights so hard and why I did give Nameless a number 6 nod is that while it's easy to say, well, just dodge this and that perfectly and win, that's not always easy in practice. Even though I'm saying all this, I still die due to my own greed on the king from time to time, so he's still plenty challenging, just perhaps not the legend to me that the hype on release had led me to buy into. And after that last pick, everyone can have their opportunity to laugh at me now. I'm well aware from the comments in my top 10 hardest bosses video and elsewhere that people find my assertion that the princes have high difficulty to be a farce. Well, that's the beauty of the community ranking. While you do get an averaged out opinion, which is awesome for comparison's sake, the necessity for such a thing other than getting a chance to give the community a voice is that a single player is likely to have outliers. Everyone has a different experience, and mine to this day, after running this game hundreds of times, is still agony against these 2 brothers. The first thing I want to address is the most common complaint I got on the original boss ranking. You need to lock on, bro. This is mostly good advice, but it's a little bit of bad advice too. Locking on is very helpful for one thing in this fight, and that's tracking Lorien when he teleports. However, the quick kill strat actually involves staying unlocked and rotating around Lorien. If you face him, he's more likely to teleport, so staying locked onto his hip and free aim causes him to rotate and makes it likely he'll miss most of his attacks without you even having to dodge. Problem is, I still haven't practiced that strat, so I've adopted what many more were likely recommending, which is mostly full lock on. With this, they teleport a shitload, which can be seriously annoying. I mean, sometimes he'll teleport something like 4 times in 10 seconds. It's absurd, but that's all RNG. The real reason this fight lands here and why I still struggle with this boss is that I have trouble deciding when to attack. I often read the princess wrong and get punished severely for it. So the strategy I've adopted until I get around to practicing the speed strat is to go for 1 hit at a time and then dodge the next attack, then hit, rinse and repeat. Sometimes I'll go for more, but only when it's obviously safe. With that said, this boss still gives me an incredible amount of trouble in speedruns, so I'll give it the nod as the second hardest boss in the main game of Dark Souls 3. Lady Maria, I mean Sister Fried. No, you know what? I'm not gonna carry on with the cheap joke and not address it. Let's jump right into why this fight is hard. Yes, it's an endurance fight. Yes, there's 3 phases. Yes, they do a lot of damage. Bully for them. That's not what makes this boss hard because it has counters like nice stagger potential and weakness to bleed. The 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 problem I have with this fight and why it's deserving of a spot this high on the list is Fried's absurd recovery time. To put it simply, Fried plays at the speed of Bloodborne a la Lady Maria while the player is stuck with the mechanics of Souls. There are times where you'll dodge 100% perfectly and be right next to her, and even if you hit at the soonest possible moment you can, she'll often jump away. This means some attacks are completely against you and have no counter. You just have to dodge and wait for the attacks that you can counter. In such a long fight, if your dodges aren't on point, this can exhaust your Estus. But I can give a few tips to help. First, note that Fried will nearly always jump away after 1 or 2 attacks, so don't go for more lest you waste stamina and leave yourself open for a counter attack. Second, track her when she jumps. You have 2 options off in phase 1, either use an R2 for a heavy stagger and follow up with quick R1 attacks, or even better, backstab her and follow up with the aforementioned combo. Problem is she's a bit hard to backstab with her weird frame, but it is worth trying. In the second phase, go for the big damage sponge and ignore Fried. If you're fast enough with the damage, she'll stay back and heal while you can punish unendingly. This phase is pretty damn easy actually, just don't get too greedy if they try to gank you. Finally, the third phase opens with a great attack. If you lock on and roll forward at the right time, you'll dodge the attack and get a perfect opportunity for a backstab. From here, you must balance Fried's attacks with those that are dangerous and those that offer the best counter. Examples are her 6-piece combo that ends in a slam. If you dodge this properly, you can backstab or at least get a punish in. There's the lunging attacks that all offer backstab opportunities, and even the invisibility teleports that are similar to phase 1, just with 3 parts and a little bit of ice. All you really gotta do is track her and punish. In reality, I think a lot of the fights below this are more deserving of this spot, but Fried's ludicrous recovery speed will forever add artificial difficulty to this fight, making it one of the hardest in the game. My choice for the number 3 slot and the hardest boss in the main game of Dark Souls 3 goes to none other than the dancer of the Bootylicious Valley. I can summarize pretty shortly why. She's got insane damage output and aggressive attacks that are hard to dodge in the first phase at least. In the second phase, she's got some fast combos that are nearly impossible to fully dodge, which can be incredibly frustrating. And if you try to keep your distance, you're likely going to get a quick beatdown from range attacks, so I don't even recommend going there. That's all there really is to it. A pretty high health bar and damage output for mid-game makes this boss insane when you get the RNG formula that breeds insane aggression from her. There is a somewhat reliable way to kill her though. First of all, use Darker Lightning Resin. It's great against her. With this, follow her side unlocked in phase 1 and go for 1 or 2 hits at a time, dodging any attacks that she throws your way. Some are great, such as the grab. If you dodge through the arm, you can get a long window to unleash the pain. Another great one is the flames. You can literally walk around them and beat her senseless if you get in the right position at the hip. Stay in close the whole time, but be ready for her to give some quick slashes if she's so inclined. When she buffs, unleash hell on her. Now you could run away from her here, but I don't recommend this unless you need to. Rather just hug that sweet ass and count the spins. This keeps you completely safe if you're hugging that booty. After the 6 spins, the 7th will be a spin attack, so roll and you're already in a great position for a heavy counter attack. At this point, just hope she's nearly dead and gives you some nice attacks to punish and not some of those crazy hard to dodge combos. Even with this strategy in mind, it can still be hard to execute, and her levels of aggression are sometimes as passive as a soft flower or as deadly as a scorpion. No matter how it ends up, it still takes plenty of skill to pull off the kill against this bootylicious maiden. And so we've come to the final 2. If you played the Ring City, you know who remains, and I'm sure it comes as little surprise. I've got to admit that I'm somewhat hesitant to put the last 2 bosses as the 1 and 2 because the DLC is so young and we may find some sick strategies later on to counter them, but I think the likelihood of that isn't too great. When it comes to Gale, in a lot of ways he's similar to Nameless in that it's an endurance fight. But if Nameless was scaled for endgame, I think Gale's health was scaled for somewhere off the end of the cliff game because it's fucking enormous! And unlike Nameless, his first phase is very erratic and hard to predict for about half of his attacks, so it can be challenging not to trade damage to some extent. He does have a lot of attacks like the long lunge and overhead slam that are great to punish if properly iframe, but that does require precise timing. One thing that does make him slightly easier is that he does stagger, but it's not on the level of Cinder. It's more like a brief deep breath and then get back into the action, but it does give you a chance to get a few hits in. The second phase I feel is much easier than the first, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. For the duration of the fight, I stayed in close and found that you actually get some great windows of opportunity to attack. And sometimes he seems almost passive, but when he does go full aggro, it can deal insane damage if you don't get out of its path properly. properly. Overall, I think this boss is harder as an endurance fight than a mechanical one, but the endurance required for the fight itself is greater than anything else in the game, that is, other than our final boss. I'm incredibly pleased to see that we finally got what feels like a near perfect dragon fight, and it ended up being one of the most challenging things the series has ever had to offer, at least on the surface. At first it felt like the fight was impossible. When I said Gale had a girthy health bar, this is the fucking Ron Jeremy Longcock Silver of health bars. I've even seen players arguing that it's a glitch that he has that much health. Well, considering this is Souls, I find that hard to believe, but I have to agree it is a very large amount of HP. Add in the fact that even with massive levels of bitch vigor this boss can kill you in 2 to 3 hits, it gets to crazy levels of difficulty. However, even though I do think this is going to be consistently the hardest boss for me, I do have some decently reliable tips to give. First is go for the head. This may be obvious to some, but I wouldn't waste time going for much else since the head takes by far the most damage. And second, in going for the head as your target, I've found that if you stay in close and in front, he is far more likely to do close range melee attacks that are easily punishable. Another attack that is seemingly hard to punish but in reality is much easier is a downward fire breath. Even though it doesn't seem so, if you wait 1 second, you can actually run into the fire as it hits the ground to get near the head for 2 to 3 hits. Over the course of the fight, using these types of attacks can easily wear him down, but of course, you must be ready for the other moves in his arsenal if he does choose to use them instead. In my last fight with him though, I managed to beat the beast down at level 79 using only 3 Estus, and that was only my second DLC playthrough, so it brings me back to a single thought. These bosses can be such a mixed experience of RNG, different strategies, different builds, and so on. This is why I think there's so much merit to a community ranking of these bosses, but I do hope that you found my experiences and tips helpful, and most of all, entertaining. I want to thank you all for joining me today, and once again, I highly encourage you to take the survey in the description and leave me a comment below giving your thoughts on as many bosses in Dark Souls 3 as you like. Don't just talk about the obvious ones either, be sure to give us all your thoughts on some of the more obscure bosses too. I look forward to using these in the next Souls video, showing off how the community feels as an aggregate whole on the full Dark Souls 3 boss experience. Until then, be sure to follow me on Twitter for all the latest updates, and be sure to check me out on Twitch where I punish myself in speedruns against these challenging foes. And of course, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.